Hello everybody, welcome to ScottyDGaming. I'm Scotty D and today is my review of Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Roll the intro, baby! Sekiro is not what you think it's going to be, whether you're a Dark Souls fan expecting Japan Souls or a Tenchu fan expecting Wrath of Souls. Yes, the game has drawn inspiration from both, but this is a unique and standalone experience with the classic framework of recent From Software games. I'm going to touch on the difficulty issue first before we talk about anything else, because this is the thing that gatekeeps whether or not you'll enjoy the game in the beginning and subsequently stick with it until the end. The game is challenging. It's not too hard or impossible, but you must learn the basic fundamentals of combat or you're going to be in for a very rough ride. If you came to this game as a Souls fan, you're the demographic who's going to be mostly affected by the difference in combat, because if you play this like Souls, then you're going to fail so hard, your dodge iframes aren't going to save you here. I came from Souls as a backstabbing, dodge and parry monster, and I had trouble in the beginning because I thought I knew it all. Once I wiped that slate clean and played this as Sekiro, the perceived difficulty reduced significantly. The difficulty is weighted more towards the start of the game rather than the end, as long as you take time in the beginning to learn. The combat is fast paced, tight, precise and responsive. It's one of the most well implemented combat systems I've ever experienced. It can be broken down into 3 areas of skill: mastery of basic mechanics, twitch reflex timing and knowledge of enemy attack patterns. It's as simple as that. The basic mechanics are as follows. Every opponent has a health bar and a posture bar. Once you deplete their health bar or fill up their posture bar, you can execute them with a death blow to finish them off. The lower an enemy's health is, the slower their posture recovers. It's a good balancing act, and different enemies are more susceptible to either health or posture damage. You've got a block button, which is also used for parrying. You hold it to block attacks and avoid all of the damage. However, for every attack you block, you get posture damage. Once your posture bar is full, your guard is broken and you'll be stunned for a little while, leaving you open to attack. A good tip, which many people miss out on, is that you can reduce your posture very quickly by holding down block rather than doing nothing. If you tap the block button just as an enemy's attack is about to land, you'll parry that attack and start to fill up your opponent's posture bar with each parry. However, a single parry is not enough, and an enemy's combo will often continue through a successful parry, meaning you have to parry multiple hits in succession before you can initiate your counter attack. Finally, there are 3 types of unblockable attacks enemies have, which are identified by a red symbol. Every unblockable has a specific counter, a bit like rock paper scissors. For red sweeping attacks, you must jump over them. For red thrust and stab attacks, you dodge directly forward into them to counter, but you must unlock a skill to do this called the Mercury counter. And lastly, for red grab attacks, you have to run or dodge out of the way. That's the only way to avoid them. Once you have these basics mastered, there are only 2 areas of skill that will help you. Those are twitch reflex timing and knowledge of enemy attack patterns. However, you can still succeed even if you are only good at one of these 2. Twitch reflex timing will help you with brand new opponents because you can react to their attacks as you see them, even without prior knowledge. And knowledge of enemy attack patterns will help you plan and identify what is going to be coming at you so you're prepared in advance. As I got more comfortable with the mechanics of the game, I started to play it a bit like a madman, keeping pressure on my opponents, standing right in their face, parrying their attacks and not giving them any room to breathe. This approach worked exceptionally well. Fortune definitely favours the bold in Sekiro. If you play the fights like a bitch, running away, waiting for a safe hit, you're only going to be rewarded with some of the most punishing long range attacks I've ever seen in a game. From Software made a brilliant combat system and they most definitely want you to use it. The story is based around your character Sekiro, who was an orphan child found on a battlefield by a master shinobi called Owl. He takes you under his wing and trains you as a shinobi with the goal of protecting Kuro, who is the divine heir. You wake up in a hole at the start of the game, separated from Kuro with only a note dropped from above as guidance on what to do next. It's like Dark Souls 1 all over again. You soon discover that you can resurrect on death because of a blessing that the divine heir gives you. However, each resurrect spreads a disease called the dragon rot through the people of the land. The beginning of the game sees you trying to get back to protect Kuro. Pretty simple. Mid-game, you're searching for some items, which basically is just a good excuse to fight some awesome bosses. In the end game, well, I didn't really understand what was happening, but I got to slaughter some more awesome bosses, so I don't really care. No doubt I could go online and read up an encyclopedia of lore as to what happened, but this review is of my direct experience, and I didn't follow some of the things that happened towards the end. The story version of Dragonrot and Resurrect is slightly different to the actual gameplay version of it. During gameplay, only a true death, which results in a trip back to the shrine, causes the Dragonrot to spread. Resurrects do not impact the spread of Dragonrot at all. Once you die enough times, characters throughout the world will begin to cough, and it'll get worse until they can no longer speak to you. Now this actually makes no difference whatsoever to anything other than side quests. You could go through the entire game and ignore the Dragonrot if you choose. You can still access merchants' inventory and upgrades, you just won't be able to talk to them. You can reset the Dragonrot status of everyone through a small side quest once the Dragonrot has gotten bad enough, so don't worry or let the idea of Dragonrot spoil your experience. It's pretty insignificant and is only there as a story foundation. Now, I'm giving a full section of this review to the bosses because that is where Sekiro excels. It's where you come to test your skills, and From Software have been very clever in designing the boss placements and their movesets. They're placed in a way as a skill check to test the player on what they should have learned before moving on. If you've just been cheesing the game, bumbling your way along, then these bosses will seem unfair and stop you dead in your tracks. If you ever get stuck, just take a minute to review the basic mechanics before you start getting frustrated. There's two types of bosses in Sekiro, mini bosses and main bosses. Although some mini bosses must be beaten to continue, while others are optional and can be skipped. Mini bosses have got 2 health bars, but you can usually stealth behind them and sneak attack a full bar off them before you fight them man to man. They generally have one predominant type of red unblockable attack that you have to watch out for, whether it's a grab, thrust or sweep. It's a good way to practice single counters. Main bosses are usually story related, have an intro, and they use every trick in the book, and you can't sneak attack any health bars off them. You have to fight them as intended, and they're also much more impressive and flashier than the mini bosses. Without spoiling anything, I just want to say that From Software's design and progression of the main bosses is second to none. Every main boss you beat should see you learning a new pattern. Do not forget these patterns, because whatever you learn will be helpful to you later on. Bosses are constantly built upon throughout, and as soon as you recognise this is when you'll start going full Neo in the Matrix on enemies. Sekiro doesn't have any customization, weapons or armour. You look the same throughout the game and be using the katana as your only primary weapon. No fashion souls here lads. All you have is the leveling up, which is split into 3 different systems. Firstly, you can only level up your health and posture by using prayer beads. 4 beads allow you 1 level up. You get prayer beads by beating bosses or finding them throughout the world. Secondly, you'll earn skill points by defeating enemies and filling up your blue experience meter. 1 full meter gives you 1 skill point. These can be spent at a shrine to acquire skills such as improved healing, new combat arts and other passive skills. Bearing in mind, you can only equip 1 combat art at a time. Thirdly, you can find new prosthetic attachments for your shinobi arm and upgrade them with crafting materials and money at a sculptor. These attachments include shurikens, a long range spear, firecrackers for stunning enemies and an axe for smashing shields. Tools are limited in use by spirit emblems, which you can only hold 15 of by default. If I'm entirely honest, I feel that these upgrades and skills, bar a few, only offer the player a distraction from actually getting good. By the end of the game I had 29 unused skill points because there was nothing in the skill trees that were any use whatsoever, and I only found one of the prosthetic tools to have universal use. The rest was so situational, it was more of an effort to switch to them than to do without. What I would class as an essential is limited to a single thing: the Makiri skill for countering thrust attacks. That's it. The things that I would also recommend though are any skill that passively increases healing or posture damage, the skill that makes it harder for you to be seen, the Ichimonji combat art because it does big posture damage while reducing yours, keeping you in combat for longer. This move is hidden in a skill tree that is unlocked by completing a small side quest for the big nosed Tengu guy near the start of the game. And finally, the only good prosthetic tool are the firecrackers, because they're effective on most things and can be bought from the merchant next to the big nosed Tengu guy. Everything else is too niche to bother with. Any time spent figuring out a way to incorporate other tools would be better off spent learning a boss or practicing your basics. Sekiro isn't without its flaws and issues. I think the stealth mechanics are bare bones and tacked on. Repeated animations, very tight tolerances for corner and ledge takedowns make you not use them because of the inconsistency. The skill trees don't have anything that adds to stealth except for making it harder for you to be seen or heard. No double takedowns, no quick succession takedowns, just bare bones single takedowns. I had an issue where the jump and aerial takedown would not trigger on a mini boss, even though I'd done it before. It can be very wonky at times, and I think this is due to the fact that certain ledges have an invisible lip that stops you walking off. If you try to jump off these ledges, your jump distance is severely shortened and it messes with the takedown. The grappling hook is very simplified, and you can only grapple to very specific ledges, normally identified by a wooden hook. While it does keep things simple, you're at the mercy of where the developers want you to go, often making it frustrating trying to find a way to a roof you need to be on because they only put a grapple point on one side of the roof instead of all sides. Headless bosses. These bosses have no place in the game. They're so disjointed from every other boss. You cannot stealth attack them, you can only damage them by using a special item which is timed and only ready available to buy at the end of the game. They have a tranquil walk of peace mist aura around them that slows you down, prevents dodging, and every attack it does builds up terror through your guard or parry, which is an insta-death if the bar gets full. It's terrible design and not clever. You have to hold down run, get a few attacks behind it, it'll then disappear, and you rinse and repeat for an exceptionally boring fight. Then there's certain aspects that have the From Software trademark unfinished feel to them. There are a couple of bosses later on that are underwater. Funnily enough, they're also headless bosses as well, for added shitness. This is the most ghetto implementation I've witnessed in the game that is otherwise very good. All you can do is swim around in circles, dodging homing attacks and waiting for an opening to strike and then retreat. No skill involved, just brain dead tedium. Even though these bosses are optional, it's still shit. The trademark dialogue progression is here from the Souls games. This seriously needs improvement. It's not intuitive to keep chatting with an NPC over and over again in the hopes of getting new dialogue. Anything you can ask about should be in a conversation menu list so you know when you've exhausted all dialogue options. The funny thing is, this conversation menu is already in the game, but it's only used a couple of times for certain conversations, another unfinished feature that it seems to forgot about halfway through development. Now, I wouldn't normally be bothered about dialogue options in a game like this, but a specific optional boss is tied behind a series of dialogues. I don't think a game where the focus is on epic boss battles should tie one of the best ones behind a series of non-intuitive conversations. If it wasn't for a subscriber warning me that I could miss out on a boss, I would have been very angry that I never got a chance to test my skills. In a game like this, any optional content should be able to be found by exploring the world, not locked behind a bad dialogue system. Sekiro doesn't have as much replayability as the Souls games due to the lack of weapons, armor and builds, but because of this, I think Sekiro has the best and most focused combat system From Software has ever made. The frustrating but relatively minor issues do not take away from what Sekiro has accomplished. I have had lots of fun, stress, anxiety with an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. It's a brilliant new IP and another badge of honour that From Software can wear with pride. I would highly recommend this to anyone who likes a challenge.